Welcome to the dairies of science fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. The man woke because pain had grown bored of him. It shifted, adjusted its grip, and that small change dragged him back into consciousness. He lay half buried in powdered alloy and something that had once been a wall, listening to emergency sirens argue with each other in alien frequencies. His first coherent thought was that dying was taking far longer than advertised. His second was that if the universe wanted him gone, it could at least be polite about it. He tried to sit up. His body disagreed, filing a formal complaint through every nerve it still owned. Somewhere above him, something enormous passed, blotting out the faint violet light that filtered through the broken dome. A ship, he guessed. Enemy or salvage. At this point he wasn't picky. He raised one hand as if the universe might notice the gesture and reward it with mercy. The universe did not. Footsteps approached, precise and unhurried. A voice spoke, not to him, but into the air, cataloging destruction in a tone usually reserved for grocery lists. When she finally looked down at him, her eyes were calm, assessing, and entirely unimpressed. She looked almost human, which felt like a cruel joke, except for the long ears that angled back slightly as if even they were tired of listening to bad news. "You are alive," she said. "I'm equally surprised," he managed. "If there's a form I'm supposed to fill out for that, I'd like to complain." Her ears twitched. "Your humor is inefficient." "Painkillers usually help," he said, "but I'll settle for being ignored." She did not ignore him. Instead, she crouched and scanned him with a device that hummed softly, projecting symbols that meant nothing to him but seemed deeply important to her. He watched them swim in the air and wondered if this was what being judged looked like. He failed spectacularly if the silence was any indication. "You should not have survived," she said at last. "That's been the theme of my week." Around them, the remains of the colony continued to cool, metal ticking as it contracted, fires burning with chemical stubbornness. The war had moved on, efficient and bored, leaving behind arithmetic mistakes like him. He tried to remember the last clear moment before everything broke, but memory skidded away from him, slick with loss. She signaled and two drones descended, their movements smooth and faintly offended by the chaos. They lifted him with careful indifference. The pain spiked again, sharp enough to make him laugh, a short, cracked sound that surprised both of them. "Is that another inefficiency?" she asked. "It's either that or scream," he said. "I'm pacing myself." As they carried him toward the waiting ship, he realized something unsettling. He wasn't afraid of her, or the empire she represented, or even whatever came next. He was tired, yes, and broken in ways that felt permanent, but beneath it all was a thin, stubborn thread that refused to snap. It annoyed him, honestly. He would have liked a clean ending. She walked beside him, observing, recording, her long ears catching every sound, every breath. Somewhere in her data, he would become a footnote, an anomaly, a human who did not disappear when instructed. He closed his eyes as the ship's interior swallowed them, thinking that if this was survival, it had a terrible sense of humor. He learned the rhythm of the ship by the way it disliked him. Every corridor hummed at a frequency that made his teeth ache. Every light brightened a fraction too late. As if the vessel itself was uncertain, he deserved illumination. They kept him in a narrow chamber that shifted gravity whenever he started to feel comfortable, which he suspected was deliberate. Comfort, in his recent experience, was considered a security risk. Time behaved strangely. Either the Empire measured it differently, or pain stretched it out of spite. He healed slowly, assisted by machines that stitched flesh with cold precision, and injected things that made his vision briefly interpret sound as color. When he mentioned this to the alien woman during one of her inspections, she paused. "That is not a listed side effect," she said. "Then congratulations," he replied. "You've discovered art." Her long ears tilted, not quite back, not quite forward. "Humans are inefficient even when injured." "I try to be consistent." She was there often, always watching, always recording, as if he might suddenly transform into something easier to understand if observed long enough. She asked questions that felt less like interrogation and more like curiosity wrapped in authority. He answered honestly, mostly because lying required energy he didn't have. Sometimes he added jokes just to see what her ears would do. They twitched every time, which he counted as a small victory. They put him to work once he could stand without swaying like a drunk philosophy student. Menial tasks, sorting salvage, assisting drones, learning interfaces that responded better to patience than force. He discovered he was good at this, which irritated him. He had been good at things before, and it hadn't ended well. Still, systems made sense. Machines didn't care who he had been or what he had lost. They only cared that he followed the logic or broke it correctly. Other beings watched him too. Soldiers, technicians, creatures whose names he never learned. He became a quiet fixture, the human who refused to collapse properly. Rumors drifted through the ship like static. He caught fragments enough to understand that surviving had made him suspicious. One cycle, the alien woman lingered longer than usual. "You do not ask to return home," she said. He considered it. Home was a word with sharp edges now. "I don't think it's there anymore," he said. "Besides, I hear I'm bad at following instructions." "That is accurate," she said, and for a moment something almost like amusement softened her voice. As she turned to leave, he realized something else. He was still hurting. He was still broken. But beneath that, something steady was forming, quiet and patient. The ship no longer disliked him as much. Or perhaps he was simply learning how to be unwelcome without apologizing for it. They stopped pretending he was temporary. It began with access. Not the dramatic kind. No sealed vaults or glowing cores, but small permissions that accumulated like dust. A diagnostic panel here, a training module there. Systems that no longer locked him out automatically as if the ship had revised its opinion. He noticed, of course. Survival had taught him to notice everything. He simply didn't comment, because commenting tended to make people revoke privileges out of spite. Training followed, delivered with imperial efficiency and a complete lack of encouragement. Simulations dropped him into hostile environments calibrated for species heavier, faster, or equipped with extra limbs. He failed often, sometimes spectacularly. He learned faster. The machines adjusted. He adjusted back. It became something like a conversation, if conversations involved gravity fluctuations and weapons that judged your emotional state. When he mentioned to the alien woman that the simulator was trying to kill him in increasingly creative ways, she checked the data. "It is only attempting to refine outcomes," she said. "Tell it I feel very refined already." Her long ears angled back. "Your sarcasm does not improve performance." "No," he agreed, dodging a projected plasma strike. "But it improves morale, mine briefly." Between sessions he worked. Between work he observed. The Empire ran on assumptions, predictable responses, measurable fear, obedience born from structure. Humans, he realized, were not built that way. They bent. They cracked. They learned where the cracks were and used them as leverage. The thought lingered, uncomfortable and warm at the same time. Others began avoiding the training bay when he was scheduled. Not out of fear, at first, but inconvenience. Watching a human push simulations past their intended limits made people uneasy. The jokes stopped being funny when the results kept improving. One cycle, the alien woman stayed through an entire session. She watched him move with a precision he hadn't owned before, conserving energy, anticipating failure instead of reacting to it. When it ended, he lay on the floor, breathing hard, smiling faintly. "You are exceeding projected thresholds," she said. "Story of my life," he replied. "Short version." She hesitated. "Pain appears to motivate you." He laughed, then winced. "I wouldn't recommend it as a lifestyle choice." As she turned away, recording her observations, he understood what was happening. He wasn't healing. He was being reforged, slowly, deliberately, by systems that didn't care what they were creating. And for the first time since everything had broken, He felt something dangerously close to purpose. It scared him enough to keep going. The first time they sent him off the ship, it was framed as an error. A navigation fault, they said. A routine escort mission that required an extra body because probability curves had dipped into what the Empire considered annoying. He listened, nodded, and strapped himself into armor that fit like it had been designed by someone who disliked humans on a personal level. The alien woman stood across from him, checking readouts, her long ears held rigid, as if trying not to overhear the future. "If this is an execution," he said, "I'd appreciate some honesty. I like to dress for the occasion." "It is not," she replied, "statistically comforting." The mission was simple in the way Imperial missions always were. Enter a destabilized orbital station, recover data cores, neutralize resistance if necessary. Resistance, as it turned out, had opinions. Armed ones. The first firefight was short and unpleasant, gravity flickering as the station tried to remember which way was down. He moved without thinking, body following patterns burned into him by simulations that had never cared whether he lived or died. Someone shouted an order in an alien tongue. He ignored it, not out of defiance, but because it was wrong. Afterward there was silence, broken only by the soft whine of damaged systems. He leaned against a bulkhead and laughed, a breathless sound that echoed too loudly. "That was unnecessary," the alien woman said, scanning the area. "So was the part where they shot at us," he said. "I felt we were past that." She looked at him then, really looked, and something shifted. Not fear, calculation. Word traveled faster than ships. By the time they returned, people knew. Not details, never details, but impressions. The human moved strangely. The human solved problems the wrong way and got the right results. The human smiled after things that should have erased him. Humor drained from the corridors when he passed, replaced by a careful distance. They gave him more missions, each one slightly worse than the last. Each one survived. He started making jokes before things went bad, as if daring the universe to argue. Sometimes it did. Sometimes it lost. The alien woman remained a constant presence, watching from command decks or battlefields, her long ears catching whispers meant to stay private. "You are becoming a variable," she said after one particularly quiet return. "I've always been bad with consistency," he said. "It's a character flaw." She didn't correct him. At night cycles alone, he felt the cost settle in. The pain never left. It simply learned manners. What replaced it was heavier, colder. He understood the Empire now, its blind spots and habits. He understood himself less. But when fear brushed against him, it didn't stick. It slid off, confused. Somewhere in the vast machinery of the alien empire, files were amended, probabilities adjusted. His name was still absent, but his presence was no longer a mistake. And that, more than anything, made people nervous. By the fifth reassignment, people stopped pretending they were favors. The orders arrived encrypted, layered in bureaucratic caution, the kind reserved for problems that had survived several solutions. He read them slowly, smiling in the wrong places. Deep interdiction, political sensitivity, deniable assets. He wondered briefly when he had become an asset and decided the paperwork probably knew before he did. The alien woman met him in the armory, her long ears angled slightly back, listening to conversations that ended the moment he entered. She handed him a device small enough to fit in his palm, its surface alive with faint light. "If this activates, you are to withdraw," she said, "and if it does, then the situation has exceeded acceptable loss." "Ah," he said, "I'll try not to exceed myself." The mission unfolded inside a drifting city grown rather than built, its corridors organic, its walls responding to presence like cautious animals. Gravity pulsed unevenly, tuned for bodies that were not his. He adapted again, feet learning the rhythm, mind mapping spaces 3 steps ahead. Opposition came in waves, mercenaries, automated defenses, things that thought too slowly. He moved through them with unsettling calm, cracking a joke over the comms when a door tried to eat his arm. Hostile architecture, he reported. Strong opinions. Silence followed, then a clipped acknowledgement. Even humor, he noted, was being documented now. At the center, he found what the Empire feared, a node of autonomous intelligence that had learned to predict imperial responses and plan around them. It spoke to him directly, its voice layered, curious. "You are inefficient," it said. "Tell me about it," he replied. It paused. That pause saved his life. When he returned, intact and mildly annoyed, the ship felt different, quieter. People watched him without trying to hide it anymore. Fear had arrived, late but determined. The alien woman studied the mission data longer than necessary. "You should not have succeeded," she said. "I've heard that before," he replied. "It's starting to feel personal." She looked at him, ears lifting slightly, and for a moment the Empire fell away. "You are changing strategic behavior," she said. "Entire regions are adjusting because of you." He shrugged. "I hate being inconvenient alone." That night's cycle, he lay awake, listening to the ship breathe. He felt the weight of what he was becoming settle deeper, shaping him from the inside. He was no longer just surviving assignments. He was rewriting expectations. Somewhere, admirals argued. Algorithms recalculated. Enemies hesitated. He smiled faintly in the dark, humor thin but intact, and wondered how long it would take before the Empire admitted the truth. He wasn't a tool anymore. He was a problem. The summons did not arrive as orders. That alone made him uneasy. No escort, no armor request, no carefully worded probability assessments. Just coordinates within the inner structure of the imperial vessel, a place he had never been cleared to enter. He went anyway. At this point, defiance felt redundant. The chamber was circular and too clean, its surfaces absorbing sound, light bending gently as if unwilling to commit. Figures waited there, advisors, strategists, minds optimized for control rather than doubt. They watched him with interest that had finally abandoned curiosity and settled into caution. "You are causing instability," one of them said. He considered correcting the grammar. "I prefer to think of it as encouragement." That did not land. They showed him projections. Supply lines rerouted because of his presence. Border systems reinforced against contingencies that consisted solely of his recent mission logs. Simulated outcomes where he existed and where he didn't. The difference was uncomfortable. "You were never intended to reach this point," another voice said. He nodded. "Neither was your empire, if we're being honest. Everything starts as an accident." The alien woman stood apart, observing, her long ears angled forward, catching every inflection, every shift in tone. When she spoke, the room quieted. "He does not destabilize systems," she said. "He exposes assumptions." Silence followed, heavy, thoughtful, dangerous. They offered him structure, rank without title, authority without recognition, a place in the shadows where deniability lived comfortably. He accepted because refusing would have been dramatic, and he was tired of drama. Afterward, walking the quieter corridors, he laughed softly. "Congratulations," he told her. "I think I've been promoted to rumor." "That is not humorous," she said. "It is to me," he replied. "Means I don't have to attend meetings." Her ears flicked despite herself. The work changed after that. Less action, more influence. He advised operations that never bore his name, redirected conflicts before they ignited, removed threats that hadn't realized they were threats yet. Science fiction technologies folded around him. Predictive engines, neural liaisons, probability sculptors, and he learned how to bend them without breaking them. Or how to break them politely. Fear followed him now, not loud but respectful. People stepped aside. Plans were adjusted when he asked questions. Humor became a liability, jokes landed like warnings. He used them anyway, a thin thread anchoring him to something human. One quiet cycle, the alien woman joined him at a viewport, stars drifting past like uninterested witnesses. "You are becoming what they fear," she said. He watched the light scatter across the glass. "I was afraid of that." "Are you?" she asked. He smiled, small and tired. No, but I am afraid of what comes after they stop fearing me. She said nothing. Her ears caught the silence and for once did not flinch. The Empire did not announce its decision. Empires never did. They adjusted quietly, the way massive bodies always had, altering orbit instead of admitting collision. He felt it in the pauses, in the way urgent alerts no longer arrived for his opinion because the situation had already been shaped to avoid it. Conflicts dissolved before they reached escalation. Enemies chose different routes. Admirals slept better without knowing why. Somewhere deep in the imperial network, his projected probability curves flattened into something dangerously calm. "You've become infrastructure," he said to the alien woman as they walked a corridor that once required clearance he never received. "I should charge rent." "That is not how infrastructure works," she replied. "Tragic," he said. "I would have been excellent at it." She watched him now, without pretending she was only observing. Her long ears no longer tracked every sound in the room. They stayed relaxed, angled toward him instead. The change was subtle, but then so was everything that mattered. The final operation was almost disappointing. No weapons fire. No collapsing stations. Just a transmission routed through him, filtered by systems he had helped redesign, delivered with precision sharp enough to cut ambition cleanly in half. An uprising dissolved into negotiation. A war ended before it could convince itself it was necessary. When it was over, there were no cheers, just silence, thick with recalculated futures. "You could leave," she said later. "They would allow it." He considered that. The idea of leaving felt distant, like a joke told too late. "I wouldn't know where to go," he said. "Besides, I've grown fond of disappointing powerful people." She studied him, then nodded. "You are no longer broken." He smiled. "No, I'm just reassembled creatively." They stood at a viewport as stars slid past, indifferent and eternal. He remembered the man who had woken in rubble, annoyed at the universe for taking too long to kill him. He felt a strange affection for that version of himself, fragile and furious and stubborn enough to survive by accident. Now, fear no longer followed him. Respect did, and something quieter, understanding. In the Empire's records, he would remain unnamed. A variable, a correction, a reminder written between lines no one liked to read. That suited him fine. As the ship altered course, he laughed softly. "You know," he said, "for a life built on pain, this ending feels suspiciously peaceful." Her ears twitched. "Do not trust it." "I never do," he replied. "That's how I got this far." The stars kept moving. The Empire adjusted. And for the first time since everything had broken, he felt whole. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer owned him. That, he decided, was victory enough.